Marina Pereira, madam. Dr. Marina Pereira, madam, is currently Associate Professor and Head Department of Economics, Nagindas Khandwala College, Malad, Mumbai. She is a co-coordinator of MA Economics and Director of the Gandhian Studies. She has a teaching experience of around 30 years. She has completed a BA from Sophia College, Mumbai. She is a recognized PhD guy. Madam is on the Board of Studies in Economics of KG Somaiya College of Science and Commerce and Mitibai College also. She was a chairperson of examination panel and member of various syllabus revision panels of Mumbai University. She received the Best Paper Award. She was a chief coordinator for team for winning Best College in Maharashtra in 2018-19 award for Scientific Research Association for Economics and Finance, Chennai, for participation in the Know Your Economics test. She was invited as a chairperson, as well resource person and panel members at many state, national, and international seminars, conferences, and university level workshops. Madam has presented papers at international level, state level, seminar and conferences, and published many articles in national, international, and state reputed journals. She has organized various national conferences and webinars. She has been a member of advisory board of conference and invited as a syllabus expert on various subjects. So today we have a very well-known economist among us. I personally and on behalf of Department of Economics, Pragati College, I welcome you, madam, in this fourth day of online intercollegiate lecture series. And without wasting much time, I request you to start the lecture.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words and your kind introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank Pragati College and all the dignitaries and Chendra sir and his team for organizing this wonderful online lecture series. It's a wonderful initiative where students get to learn a lot of economics beyond the classroom and connect economics with reality. So thank you very much, Pragati College, for giving me this opportunity. And a very good evening to all of you gathered here, my members from the teaching faculty, as well as my dear students. Now, in today's lecture, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to connect women and development, that is with respect to self-help groups and related to COVID-19, the scenario we have at present. And I will explain things, certain case studies and all which have taken place, reality, connect you to that. And later on, we can have a discussion regarding certain issues. If you have some queries or you want to discuss certain things, we can have it after the session. So I'll just share my PPT. Okay. Is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my topic is lives to livelihoods. And basically my PhD topic was about, women's self-help groups. So microfinance, micro enterprises. And I have written, most of the papers which I've written are related to microfinance and so on, and how with changing times, they have evolved. So I'm going to connect this aspect to COVID times. Now, basically, before we go ahead, I want to tell you about what is a self-help group. Now, we have women's organizations, but they can be of a large number of people, women. But here, when we say self-help group, there are around 10 to 20 women from the same socio-economic environment. And most of them, of course, they reside close to each other from the same village. In a particular village, you can have more than one self-help group. And the basic thing is that they all know each other very well, and they have come together for a certain purpose. So here you have, I have just shown you certain images where they come together to discuss things in meetings. And generally these meetings are held, maybe twice a month and so on, where they can share not only economic problems, but other kind of problems that they face. And they function basically as a group. So solidarity is very important here. And later on, they also engage in micro enterprises. So the micro enterprises, which I'm going to talk about, are basically those run by the self-help groups. And their role, only those micro enterprises I will touch upon, a few of them are taking into account, whatever I need to talk to you regarding COVID-19. Now, this particular concept was introduced by Professor Mohammad Yunus, and he started the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, where some of you may be already aware of, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize in the year 2006. Now, when we say microfinance, basically, people think it's just small amounts of loans. But besides that, the main principle is, instead of giving loans to individuals, the loans are given by banks to groups. And why we say women groups is more than 90% of self-help groups, even in the surveys which I had carried out during my PhD and so on, and even later on, most of the groups, more than 90% groups are women groups. Now, basically, when we have these groups, they do not need to give any kind of collateral to the bank. Collateral is security. Because normally when they take loans, these women on their own are not able to get loans because they are very poor. They belong to the marginalized sections where they may belong to certain, castes and classes which are generally neglected by society. So it's very difficult for them to get finance. Good evening, Shendra sir.
Madam, good evening. I will interrupt you for a fraction of a second. Due to the technical problem, I was not in a position to join on time. I'm extremely sorry, ma'am. Just I want to say a few words about the madam. Madam is a very good friend of mine, and she is associated with our institution since last 10 years, and we are keeping always in touch with each others. And there are a lot of exchange of programs regarding the PG and so many things. So it's my pleasure to welcome Marina ma'am on the behalf of my department and college, and extremely sorry for joining late, madam. You can continue.
Yeah. Sir, thank you very much. No problem about that, sir, because, technical issues can arise, anywhere. Yes. That is what, even while keeping the PPT ready, I kept thinking, what if it doesn't work and all? But it's a wonderful initiative on your part to, have these lecture series. And thank you very much for involving me and my students as a part of it, so that they also can get a chance to learn many things, of economics outside the classroom.
Exactly.
Yes,
That's right.
Economics in the classroom, everyone does, but you and your team from Pragati College have really done something, an innovative aspect. Yes.
Yes, madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we were talking about self-help groups where we have these marginalized women who are very scared to do anything on their own. They're even scared to approach banks for finance because banks are not willing to give them funds since they don't have any security to offer. Is that they come together and for a certain period of time, they save small amounts of money on a monthly basis, small subscriptions, whatever they can afford to. It's decided, and then you have the president and the secretary taking the initiative. They open group accounts in banks, and this has been going on in India as well for a long period of time. Now, when we talk about these women, basically the banks don't insist on collateral because there is group guarantee and all the women know each other. They see to it that the loans are properly paid. In fact, the bank managers also in many cases, when I spoke to them, they said there was no problem about repayment because the women were very, very responsible. And initially they take loans for emergencies, but later on they branch on to micro enterprises and production of, say, maybe papads or pickles or various other products, right? Even from some of them going for production and sale of fruits and vegetables. They have their own nurseries. So it all depends on the area. Some of them also used to make even chalks or stitch uniforms of school children and so on. And over a period of time, they are entitled to government subsidies, especially those belonging to the BPL category. So those with yellow ration cards. And then they get bank funds also, where bank loans, which they have to repay. Most of these women, they can get funds even for their personal emergencies. So instead of going to money lenders and so on, when they become part of these self-help groups, they have a sense of dignity within themselves, also a sense of solidarity. So we have in India itself, NABARD started the SHG bank linkage program in the 90s. We have the Self-Employed Women's Association. We have various other microfinance institutions in the private sector. But I'm going to talk about today is many of these women's self-help groups, which have really played an important role in combating and in helping out during COVID-19. They not only help to save lives, but they also help to save livelihoods. And in turn, what has to be done? So now that's what I was telling you about these self-help groups. We have around 67 million Indian women who are members of these groups, because on an average, around 10 to 20 women are part of one SHG. And in their normal course, in addition to their economic aspects, they also discuss things like domestic violence. So they all come together and they try to support the woman who is suffering. They may talk to their family members, and many times they even help her to approach legal authorities and the police station so that she gets support, respite, and relief. Because otherwise, on her own, she may feel, so they are like sisters as part of these self-help groups. Now, during COVID-19, as you can all see, we had major problems like, the migrants. They were returning to their hometowns because they were not able to pay rent. Then because of the lockdown, most of the people in the informal sector lost their jobs. And many of them were at the brink of starvation. So at such times, we are going to talk about what exactly these self-help group women did. They not only helped themselves, but they went beyond that to help society. Now, when we look at this, the lockdown obviously was put into effect to prevent the community spread of the virus. But it led to a lot of panic and chaos. Everyone wondered whether, their jobs would be intact. And we have many women in the informal sector who stopped getting contracts from the contractor, or those who were in, household employment, some of them after the initial months, they stopped getting their salaries as well. So there was constantly a fear and a crisis of survival. And many of the families, according to, conversations with them, they switched on to, instead of eating twice a day, they switched on to one meal, and sometimes even in the whole day, there wasn't, they weren't able to feed their families. So what happened is some of them, at times used to even take turns, that some would eat on one day and some would eat on the next day. So it was that bad in certain cases. So it was not only the illness and the starvation which, further reduced the immunity, but also the loss of jobs and the impending disaster, whether they would be able to return to their jobs in future. With no place to stay and so on, I told you the migrants had to return to their hometown. And there are many studies which have been carried out, and it has been shown that many of the women who were earlier working, now that they remained at home, and many of the schools also not being the schools, everything had to shut down. The girls, the colleges, and so on, they had to be at home. So women faced a lot of more, greater number of problems, because they had to have more household work and be confined to the house. That lockdown confined everybody, but household work, especially the unpaid household work, is considered to be that done only by the women. In such circumstances, they were very vulnerable to gender-based violence. So in such circumstances, what was done is the women self-help groups played a very important role, like going and talking to the women's families and so on. And since they were local, they could find out wherever there was such a case of violence. Then they could try to reason out with the family members and so on. So they have played a very important role in trying to curb this gender-based violence which occurred in households. Then I'll give you an example of, there are many such examples. This is a very successful one in Haryana. Now, this canteen was in existence even earlier, and it was under you have the National Rural Livelihood Mission. In the same way, different states have state rural livelihood missions. Now, these are programs run by the government to provide a livelihood for poor women. So now these are for poor rural women, and they ran this canteen. They used to supply, veg thali at ₹10. This was before COVID. And the self-help group of 12 women used to run this canteen. And most of the funds, of course, were given by the government. So the people who came there to eat, generally the poor, they had to pay only 10 rupees. Now, the moment the lockdown began, this canteen shut down. Now, this was a source of livelihood because the women were employed there, this micro enterprise, they got the funds from the government. They used that amount to the incomes to run their families. But with the lockdown, this came to an end. Now, they did not get enough of vegetables or grains and other essentials that were required for, running the canteen. So the crisis started there itself. But very soon, with government effort, the SHG women in their meetings decided that no, they won't allow this canteen to stop, not only for themselves, their own livelihoods, but to save lives, and save lives of, say, migrants or others who are bedridden, or maybe those who are not in a position to provide for themselves. So they started discussions, and with government support, once again, the canteen started functioning. Now here they played a very critical role in providing food, because at such times, I told you, hunger was a prevalent problem, and they served food, and this was free of cost during the lockdown, to all the migrants, the homeless people, the street vendors, all the poor and the vulnerable. And approximately around 1,000 people came and ate food. And not only that, they took home food even for their children and so on. So this hunger problem to a large extent in this area was tackled by these SHG women. Now, this is one single example, but it was replicated because of its success in various other areas and various other states as well. So in most places where, we have seen that food was being served, in many cases, it was being prepared by self-help groups of women who were helped by the government with respect to funds. But of course, these women had to be there as frontline workers, risking themselves, in times of disease, they had to travel, but they came there and they prepared food, and at the same time, they earned their own livelihood. Now, this particular canteen and others also, they face certain challenges. Sometimes the people who came there to eat were alcoholics or drug addicts. And these are some, case studies reported by the women. And these, these men, once they ate, they created a lot of problems. And it is not only that the women have to face a problem traveling to the place of work, many times their families don't allow them to come. So they were scared that if, at home they hear that there are alcoholics or there was a drug addict who came and created problems, the next day their family wouldn't allow them to come and work there. And this canteen venture would be put to an end. So then they took a meeting and they discussed. And as a result of which they saw to it that the government kept certain security guards and so on. Now, sometimes what happened is the neighbors of these families, where the self-help group women came from, they felt that they traveled so they could spread the virus. So again, the group decided, they created awareness, they decided what to do. And what they felt was that, they should spread awareness. And they invited those people, whoever tried to, find fault with them, that you can come and see that we are maintaining all COVID protocols. The women are doing a very great humanitarian job of addressing hunger problems and so on. And once all the precautions are being taken, so whether it comes to, physical distancing, sanitization, all this was being done, then, and the women were really, providing food during lockdown. So this was a very noble cause that they are doing. So nothing could affect them. And with all these norms, there wouldn't be some virus that they're carrying back. On the contrary, the women were being paid an income which helped their families. So they earned their livelihoods to that. So they not only saved lives of those suffering from hunger, I told you around 1,000 to 1,500, people per day, and they worked in shifts. So there were some working in the morning, and this is how they functioned. Then in some of the groups, there was a problem about caste conflicts because this constantly happens in self-help groups. And they felt that, that work allocations should be such that some women should be only given the marketing job because they're very good at decision making, the upper class caste women and so on. And some should only be given, say, washing of utensils and so on. But later on, they realized that this would spoil the group, whatever they had emotions towards the group. So they shouldn't divide this group on the basis of caste and so on. And bringing caste into the picture would only lead to breakdown of this group. So then in meetings, they discovered this. And later on, the work was properly allocated irrespective of caste. They treated each one equally. So all the 12 women, and this happened in other groups as well, they felt that the real strength of themselves was as a collective, not as individuals. So they shouldn't, take all these things into consideration. So whether it was cooking the food or washing the utensils or even, purchasing goods required for the canteen, all this was shared among themselves. Now, when we come to the informal sector, what is seen is that many of these women in the informal sector, they are into unregulated activities and they have not registered themselves. So with the pandemic, they were not entitled to certain benefits which the government actually gave to those who were not working. So they had a decline in their wages because the contractors obviously stopped payment. And in most cases, you find that it is most of the women who work in the informal economy, say in households and so on. So they again faced a lot of problems because of lack of income. And also, when you talk about health benefits, they suffered on this account. So this was another issue which took place there. Now here during COVID, as I told you, that especially women who went in for who were casual labor, that is working on construction sites and daily wage workers, as well as those who are into households also, but they don't have things like insurance. They don't have health and medical benefits, no childcare and all this. They had to manage the household jobs as well as lack of income, and many times lack of income from spouse as well. And many lack of income from spouse also led to a lot of so there was a lot of uncertainty here. And because of this, the Seva did a lot in this case. And even the self-help group women, what they did is they realized that they have to do a lot of counseling. Now, counseling couldn't be done, moving house to house in many cases because of, social distancing and so on. So they tried to talk over, tele-counseling was done in many cases, so that they could at least talk to these women, find out, inform them about their rights, their entitlements, and so on. And I told you that most in the informal sector, there is lack of proper documentation, which again prevents them from, getting many of these benefits. Then you have a lot of workers covered under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And here again, women suffered because many of the males were employed instead of them. So they suffered on account of that. And some of them could not reach their work sites or their fields because of lockdown measures. Then there was, disruption of supply chains, and they couldn't access local markets. Yeah, and they have agricultural inputs. So women, whether they were on farm jobs or non-farm jobs, were very, very badly affected. So again, they had to decide what exactly to do. If not these jobs, then what? So they were able to come together, and they were helped by these self-help groups so that they could group themselves and they could carry out certain other tasks which were the need of the hour. For example, some of them started making masks and so on. So whatever they were little qualified in, they taught the others as well. They trained the others so that they started producing things which were really required at that point of time. Now here, when you look at Seva also, many of these leaders were created. Some of these leaders were created also found a problem reaching these members, because they could not reach them regularly, pass on information and all regularly. So what they did is they tried to go out of the way, and I told you that they tried to go in for tele-counseling, and they were able to assist them with respect to domestic violence, even health issues, healthcare issues, and so on. And we have these associate social health activists and Anganwadi workers. All of them tried to go around and spread awareness about how to prevent the virus. All the safety precautions which could be taken. They tried to go house to house and in whatever way they could, keeping in mind COVID norms. And this is what they tried to do to protect lives. And here you have, it's not only the physical health which suffered, but I told you, you have a lot of problems with the women, their mental health and well-being, because when you look at these women, their earnings, they have to look after the whole family. So if it was a woman who lost the job, and many cases, the husband was not working at all. He was into drinks and so on. So because of that, what happened is, now that they had no job and they had no income, because for a long time, even, maids were not allowed. So they again faced problems. So the poverty increase of these families, finding a job was of top priority. And that is why these grassroots leaders tried to involve them, enroll them in various social security schemes, and help them to fill the forms, gave them information whom they should approach. So they literally went house to house doing that. And self-help groups were very important in this, because when you talk as a, when you have these self-help groups, they know about the other women. It's not that, the woman knows only about herself. They know about the other woman, who is the most marginalized, who requires help most, and so on. So they use this women power to actually track down and identify community members, anybody who had to return as migrants. They tried to see what they could do in such circumstances, and whether they could prevent them from returning by, seeing to it that they get access to ration and food supplies and so on. So here, most of these self-help groups of women, as well as other women groups from Seva and so on, they were used as, they were the leaders where they took a lot of measures trying to bring about awareness. That is one thing. Awareness about, how to save lives on account of the virus. And secondly, how to save lives due to hunger and so on. And also how to approach health organizations, where to get help in case the virus had struck, individuals or their families. So that is what they tried to do. They helped the women to enroll for Jan Dhan accounts, because through that only the government offered, cash benefit to the families who really required it. And many of the women did not even have these accounts. So then these grassroots leaders, they helped in that. Now here, when we look at these group meetings during COVID, of course, they could not meet in that manner. After some time, because of these lockdowns, they were not allowed to come together. But the group meetings, of course, they serve as a platform where the women can come together, they can voice their concerns, they can advocate their rights, entitlements. They feel a sense of oneness. And in many of the self-help groups, those women who don't come for meetings, they're charged a penalty. So if they meet twice a month, they charge a small penalty, maybe 10 rupees, 15 rupees, but it pinches. Because, the moment, you're charged a penalty, you know that you have to regularly come for the meeting. So that is what is done. Initially, the penalty used to be only 1 or 2 rupees. Over time, that has increased, and that is added to the group fund. So they come there, they listen, and there are women who initially are very shy of speaking, but then when they see others doing that, they also come and they come out with various problems that they face. Now, during COVID, this could not be achieved to a large extent. And sometimes a few of them tried to meet and, discussed, of course, keeping in mind the norms. And what they did is, especially when there was an easing of COVID protocol to some extent, they started discussing what they could do to improve health and also financial literacy. Because many times the women suffer because of their financial illiteracy. They're exploited by everyone, money lenders to people within their own households. So now they were more confident, they negotiated for wages with their employers and so on. And that is what they were informed by the SHG women. Because SHG women themselves, they had contact with a lot of, various organizations and so on. And because of that, they could involve the other women as well in these efforts. Now, once I told you that these social distancing norms were there, it created a lot of challenges for self-help groups that they couldn't physically come together. But then instead of that, they had digital meetings and digital meetings so that, across the phone and so on. So that is what they tried. Initially, we had physical meetings, but later on through their phones only they had, because the whole country went digital. But some of the women, of course, faced problems on that account because either they had internet problems or they had problems regarding ownership of phones. They had to rely on, the phones of their family members and so on. So that again created some few problems for them. But wherever possible, the women attended these meetings. And it was found that the moment they attended these meetings, there was a lot of positivity. It increased their confidence. And there were a lot of positive outcomes here. Now, whenever you talk about self-help groups, I told you, they function as a team. It's collective efforts, and what they cannot bargain for, maybe with their employers also. You have this, trade unionism. The same logic applies here. Of course, they don't go and fight, but they can reason out with their employers, and the marginalized women, they can come out of their poverty traps as a group. So, for availing rights and entitlements, they can do that, but on their own, it sometimes becomes difficult. They may need state support. They may need support from the community, some infrastructure. And many times it is, NGOs also, they are responsible for going out of the way and, helping out by serving as catalysts. They try to help these self-help groups because the women have the ability to do that. But sometimes they just need a little support. Now here we have this National Rural Livelihood Mission, and was launched way before COVID, 2011. And then, of course, it has been called as Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. Antyodaya is the poorest of the poor. So it was meant for the poorest rural women. Basically, they're in rural areas. And here we have them having almost 66 lakh self-help groups, according to the Ministry of Development. And women's self-help groups, it has been said that they have been pivotal actors, central actors in the COVID-19 crisis management. In fact, self-help groups initially also, even if there were problems, whether it is natural disasters and so on, they have been called in case of crisis management. And now this was no less than another crisis that they had to face. So they, as I told you, that they belong to the same environment, and that is very important. So they know the problems of their fellow sisters, their fellow, their neighbors and so on, all belong. Because, someone from outside cannot come and make them understand. It's normally you also as students, no matter how much the professors tell you, you listen to what your peers, your friends and all tell you. That makes more sense to you. So then the same way here, they remain closely connected and they enjoyed each other's trust. That is very, very important. Plus, once you have these women being part of the groups, they had a lot of local knowledge. So they knew who was the most marginalized and so on. And they tried to provide relief to the most vulnerable. So they were a medium, a conduit, you can say a medium, an avenue. So these most marginalized women and their families, in order to protect lives and livelihoods, all this was done through women's self-help groups. They played a major role. One, I told you, was a canteen model. And besides that, so the hunger problem was utmost at that time. Besides that, they went in for doorstep delivery for a range of services, right from financial services, and they were called as, bank sakhis. You can see here, bank sakhis, that they tried to give all sorts of financial services, especially to those who could not leave. They were bedridden or very old women, widows, someone who was afflicted by the virus and so on. So they tried to help them out, either giving cash relief packages or trying to, handle their bank accounts on their behalf. So that is how they helped them with digital payments and all, because at such times, these were the people who faced a lot of problems. Maybe they were, they really required help because they were all alone or abandoned and so on. So in such cases, they tried to reach out to marginalized, in many cases, it was women, and even beyond, their families as well. Now here you have, through the self-help groups, women were given training and they had to reach out to all others in their community and so on. and train them about the prevention of COVID-19, whatever measures had to be adopted, whatever health information, whatever behavioral changes were required. So all this, the SHG women had to, they were trained, and then they had to train other women in their neighborhood and so on. Not only other women, they had to train other households as well. So that is what they did. They tried to, create awareness and prevent the virus spread in rural areas, but it also happened in urban areas, predominantly in rural areas, because when you look at rural areas, many times it's very difficult to access health facilities. There are various remote areas, and especially in rural areas, everything functions through self-help groups. Because my study of self-help groups also was in rural Maharashtra, and in places like Jawhar and so on, if you look at, it's a very hilly area, and the villages are very far apart from each other, the dwellings, and you find it very difficult even for transport facilities in some hilly areas and so on. So at such places, a lot of work was done through self-help groups. It was not only Maharashtra, but the whole of rural India, you can say. There were a lot of innovations which, these self-help groups came around with. And they tried to spread awareness, not only through digital media, but in some places they tried to, wherever they were literate, they tried to draw and write on walls through rangolis, some creative way in which you try to spread some slogans about COVID-19, what is to be done and so on. Then there were WhatsApp groups which they made in some of the states, then voice messages. So everything very creative, and then they did it in some areas with a loudspeaker and so on. So depending on the group, they tried to, have meetings and discuss how best to spread awareness. So even if you are given, say, group projects, like 5 of you together or 10 of you, you think what best you can do. So then that's how they all came about with different ideas, how to spread awareness about this virus. Then you have a lot of, how to have hand wash facilities, because you don't have taps and all in many cases. So even there were a lot of innovations on how to create social distancing, how to have proper sanitation facilities, then about how to deliver goods in boats and all they delivered. They created a supermarket. It was difficult to access goods. So then they tried to go in for doorstep delivery, and through boats also they tried to see. And Kudumbashree was one, network of a lot of women's groups, very, very famous, and a lot of not only services given, but a lot of goods were delivered. Then whatever skills they had, like, many of them, I told you, were into stitching. Now, SHGs which were into catering, they became canteen models. So they, created canteens where they would try to solve the hunger problem. Some self-help groups which were into stitching clothes and so on, say uniforms, because now schools and all were not working. So they didn't have those kind of orders. So what they did is they tried to stitch other kind of things. And what they tried to do is protective gear for the medical personnel and so on. They tried to start stitching that. So with a little bit of training, they diversified. Whatever skills they had only, they tried to adapt it, repurpose the activities, and meet the demands of the crisis. So here again, this protective gear and all has saved a lot of lives. And at the same time, when the SHGs did that, they received employment, self-employment. They received payment for the same, and it helped them gaining, protecting lives as well as livelihoods. So these micro enterprises, I'm only referring to the ones run by these self-help groups. So the ones into catering and the ones into, because now, of course, with the lockdown and other restrictions, catering took a backseat. So instead of, not having jobs at all about catering, they went in for the canteen model. So they tried to provide food in various forms, tiffin services and so on. Especially tiffin services for those who were quarantined or those who were bedridden and so on. In many cases, they were helped by the government also, state governments and so on, with funds. The initiative, of course, was theirs. The effort also was theirs. Now, they also tried to go in for production of I told you not only protective gear, but also masks for the general community. Then, sanitizers, hand wash. And so you can see here how most of the self-help groups, they had machines. So then they had to diversify. So that is what happened. Then here also, we have a case of many of these self-help groups trying to help out with those who were stranded, and many families were stranded and they couldn't go back till, the norms, they had cleared the norms. So in the meantime, they suffered on account of food. So they got help through these canteens. Now here there are a few statistics, of course, and rather than the statistics which show that how many women, got a lot of help and how much of sanitizers they, how much lakh sanitizer they produced and so on, and crores of face masks, and you have all these kitchens called Didi kitchens or Didi ki rasois, different innovative names, and Dal Bhat Kendras, depending on which state they came from, Prerna canteens and so on. So that is how they were managed by women self-help groups in most of these cases. Then here also, in Assam, they manufactured, cotton cloth, and this was very important culturally, and it was very important during festivals. But now, of course, no festival, no festivities during lockdown and thereafter. So what they did is they used that material to make masks, because ready-made material they had, so they just diversified. So that is what they did. If they had machines and they had material, they put it into effect and they started manufacturing masks with local materials, whatever they had. And then here also, they had khadi, they diversified beautiful paintings and so on. So they created all this in depending on whichever state we're talking of. Now here I told you about, they not only gave essential services, but through telephone-based centers, they went in for tele-counseling services. And this has provided a lot of help, not only about gender violence, but antenatal, because, when the babies were born, it was very difficult at such times for the women to access health facilities. So they tried to identify which women needed antenatal, before birth and after childbirth care. And not only the women, the babies as well, and the children who needed immunization facilities, then pregnant and lactating mothers, and also whatever supplements they required, because their immunity had to be taken care of. So many of these SHG women, they were aware, because when they are spread out in the community, they're aware of what happens nearby. So they went door to day in their own locality and they could identify. So this was a great help in saving a lot of lives of these women. Now here also, all the essentials for women, they played an important role in distribution, plus nutrition for the children and the infants, all the essential commodities for women and children, because it was very, very difficult at such times to win avail of such services and commodities. And many times, because of gender violence, the women had no income, so they did not even dare to ask for money for all these provisions. So they were supplied by these women self-help groups. Then here you also see about benefits of government programs. They tried to go about and see to it that everybody got these rations under the public distribution system, and also all the other government schemes. So many times the people were not aware, especially not only the migrants but others as well, the underprivileged sections. So whenever they got to know about all this, because as I told you, self-help groups are very connected to higher forums. So through that, they get the information faster and they were able to spread this information. Then here we talk about these, bank sakhis, as I told you. And what they did is they tried to provide all these, to manage the help for banks. Because if, everybody rushed to the bank at the same time, there would be a lot of problems about social distancing and also they tried to reach and give doorstep delivery. Then even they help to manage the rush and collect the funds, and also provide digital services to the people who are not very financially literate. Then you have here also about, distributing masks and so on, I told you, and also the women received remuneration for these activities. Now, once we look at all this, they played a big role, but remember in that process, they had to, serve the community is one thing, but they also had to take care of their own health and other household responsibilities, their own household responsibilities. So that was a problem that many self-help groups faced, the women, that they had to combine, social, whatever they had to do for society along with their, what they had to do for their families. And that was a big, big challenge for them. Now here you have, the moment you have these self-help groups, even in the coming, days, I'll just go through this, certain points, and I'll explain them together. They are likely to face challenges because, there are restrictions on in-person meetings. Still you have, these social distancing norms and about gathering together, because you had not only phase 1 of the lockdown, but a number of phases. So with every phase, again, you have social distancing. And the moment you have the social distancing, it interferes with group solidarity. So then, when they cannot meet face to face, digital meetings, as you all know, even, taking classes digitally is not that effective. Then when you have, physical classrooms, online teaching, during lectures, many times it's not as effective as physical presence. So even the same problem for self-help groups. So it may affect their relationship with each other, their solidarity. Many of them, of course, they have got incomes throughout, but then the incomes were not up to the mark. Whatever goods they used to produce and sell, that also they have produced their masks and so on. But in some cases, as you will see in the next slides, there was a problem that they did not get properly paid by the various agencies. And where they did not, they provided the masks and the sanitizers and so on, but their payments are still yet to come. So in such circumstances, obviously it will affect their income levels, the savings which the groups can, bring together and accumulate. And once they have less of savings, it will affect the future of these groups and micro enterprises. Because, one has to think in terms of not only during COVID times, but after COVID times, how they can be sustainable. And for this purpose, they can, a lot of revival strategies are required. So during the crisis, of course, they jumped into action. They helped whatever goods were required during the crisis. They gave a lot of community services. But at the same time, remember that they need to have markets for their goods. They need to be guaranteed minimum prices, because otherwise their livelihoods, as of now, it has not been affected to a large extent, because we are talking about the short run. But in the long run as well, they will need help from the government and other local agencies so that their livelihood prospects and so on are protected. Now I'll just come to the latter slides, just a minute. Yes. Now here we need to strengthen this cluster-based approach, because it is not only about farm and non-farm livelihoods, not only about the present, but the future as well. So these collectives have to be properly formalized, and they need not only support, but inputs as well. So when you say inputs, it's not just finance, but training, financial and digital literacy programs for them, further skills which can be developed, mentorship, so that they can guide the group properly, and the group doesn't get dissolved because of some problems which may affect it. Because the crisis, of course, they have gone out to help others, but at the same time, it can take its toll on their physical and mental health, because they have to balance community, management roles, along with their managing their own families and themselves. So many times it takes a heavy toll on the women members, and in this they need to be helped. So here we have, these two-way benefits which we are talking about, these self-help groups, where they provided a lot of services, entitlements, food, health, as well as other services. And on the other hand, so they helped to save lives, but they also created a lot of self-employment opportunities, and they tried to, provide goods for the community, because all this was decentralized production. Everyone didn't have to wait till, mass came. They could provide in the neighborhood only, because I told you they had material in some cases. So they tried to put it to proper use. And then there needs to be, I told you, institutional tie-ups and guarantee women's health and safety. So we need a lot of collaborations. A women's self-help group, I told you 10 to 12 members, but that is not enough. You may have, 10 to 20 members, but they need help. They need catalysts. So they need the help of, financial organizations, plus also the government and so on. So state commission and so on. These are very much required. So whether it's the central government or the state government, you have, they need help with all these people who function at the village level. So village level institutions, Panchayati Raj, and many times they have, religious leaders and so on. They need help from all these sections of the community, because unless they get the cooperation, it becomes very difficult for them to go out with a good service that they are carrying out. So here we have seen that, women's needs, what the pandemic has shown, that women have definitely suffered, and but in spite of suffering, they have tried to go about, especially when it comes to groups. They have gone about trying to save lives and livelihoods. And when we look at these lived realities, they face gender-based, we're talking about even these SHG women and all the others. If you talk about providing employment to women and self-employment, at the same time, they need help, not only with a job, but providing them from gender-based violence. When they are doing the job, they need childcare services, and they need maternal and child health benefits, as well as social protection. So it's not just jobs or livelihood which has to be provided, but all kinds of other problems also which have to be taken care of. So in a package, all these things have to be done. Now, once you look at this, COVID and so on, this last aspect is what I come to now. That is, when you look at, the women entrepreneurs and the women enterprises which were there, whether they were run through, women self-help groups, or they were run by other groups of women, compared to the males, there were different kinds of, they did not want to take loans. They tried to rely on their own sources of finance. And most of these enterprises suffered because, of course, disruptions in the supply chain. But you also have, customer footfall was very, very less. And many of the women, especially, those who were not, part of the self-help group, they also suffered, women entrepreneurs, especially those working as tailors or petty shopkeepers, or those who had beauty parlors. So I've tried to touch on these as well, because after all, when you're looking at women enterprises, how best these can be revived. So with a group strategy, even, these women entrepreneurs were the most affected. And you find that self-employment definitely can serve as a cushion, but we're talking about self-employment through self-help groups of women, not just, as individuals. Now, once you look at, there are a few studies which I have tried to bring here, that the women have suffered, of course, more during these problems. And what has happened is, these women enterprises, why I said I will touch upon them is, the moment the women enterprises closed down or they had problems, it was not that the women were free. Many times they had to shoulder greater household responsibilities, because now with no business to look at, even more household responsibilities fell on them. And remember, that meant unpaid responsibilities. Most of these are unpaid responsibilities. So again, that took a toll on their physical and mental and social well-being as well. So if you have the group approach where they are, able to discuss this, and you have these group forums, they're able to come about in a better way. There's a more positive outcome. Then you also find that many of them had a problem with getting services, because most of them during the lockdown and all were all digital. And here also you find that just a minute. Yeah, this is what I was telling you, that there was lesser time on their own business because it was shut down, especially those into beauty parlors or tailoring business and so on. They had to prioritize whatever time they gave to their business. Now they put it for their own households, managing their own households. So that created a lot of problem. So even reviving these businesses, the government will have to, play a role along with these self-help groups. So these women, many of them have come back into the business, but then they will have to make a group effort to diversify. Yeah. There are a lot of, they may require microfinance products. So microfinance products, when you talk about, our training plus micro insurance, as well as market support. Most of them, they deal with aspects like market support. So this is another aspect that we have to talk about. Yeah. And post-COVID, of course, whether you talk about micro enterprises or we're talking of we restart India and we have restart business. And for that purpose, let us see what can be done. Especially, we need e-market linkages and so on. And when you say government support, many times, as I told you, the self-help groups, they supported, they provided all these goods which were required in the locality, but they still have to get the payment. So they have played a very, very important role, as you can see, in producing face masks, or whether we talk about sanitizers or hand washes or community kitchens. They also had to build, I told you, social capital. Now, when you say social capital, we're talking of the solidarity efforts at such times. And this is very important because, they have really gone on to, creating awareness through solidarity, rather than, one woman saying this. When you have the whole neighborhood, 10 to 12 women from there spreading the same kind of ideas, it has helped a lot in preventing the spread of the virus and creating awareness. So now when we look at this last part, I have come to metamorphosis, means we had these self-help groups and we have these micro enterprises, plus we have other women entrepreneurs who have suffered. So earlier, the self-help group movement was what? We just had small savings and credit groups. But today, they had become, during COVID, a very important platform and a medium of saving lives and livelihood. So from especially those who are destitute and poor, on the basis of self-help and solidarity. So from here, now where they can go. This also was about, how they helped themselves and they helped society as well, especially the health workers, the police personnel. They reached out to one and all. And right from, diversifying their business, school uniforms, to now sewing masses and so on, community kitchens, almost all states. These are various, facts and figures. Some of them played a role in identifying pockets of hunger and starvation, identifying stranded workers, the most vulnerable, and so on. So you have here a lot of facts and figures. But besides that, from here, where do they go now? And that is, you find, yeah, you have the Sakhis here also. yeah, looking forward here to avoid physical distancing or social distancing playing havoc with the soil. You need catalysts, and they haven't received revenue. So the moment they get these orders from the government, effort should be made that they are paid in time. Because this is another thing where, even when I did a survey, some of these women complained that, their goods were purchased, but they find problems in getting the payment for it. So that is another issue which should be tackled. So in the long run, they can really function as a very, very important platform. In the short run, they've saved lives and livelihoods. They can go further from here, and they will be a sustained long-term platform to bring about change in the community as well as in the nation. But then they will require help from the state, central government, as well as NGOs, who can work as catalysts, as well as their credibility has to be restored in the community. The last slide, second last, in fact, the self-help groups function with a team spirit. Like together, each achieves more. They don't function as individuals, and we can multiply our strengths and divide our weaknesses. Because what a single woman or a women entrepreneur cannot do together, they come together and they set up women enterprises. Even when I talk about this, parlor business and so on, some of them have set up, groups now where they've opened up new enterprises post-COVID, and they've come together with people who, the others who face similar problems, because they feel in this manner they can face problems in a better manner. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of today's presentation. Thank you for a patient listening. Yes.
Thank you, madam.
Yes, yes, yes.
It was a very insightful and very interesting lecture you delivered, madam. Before going to all the formalities, I want to request all participants, if they have any doubt, any clarification they want, then the platform is open for the discussion as well as for the questions. Participants, if you want any clarification or any doubt in your mind, then you can ask madam. Madam will explain.
If there is no question from the student, madam, may I ask you one question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have gone through the budget of this FY 2023, but it has been observed government is saying that Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and other schemes are there for the women empowerment. But it has been observed since last 13 years, there is no proportion change in budget. Whatever the provisions are made in the budget, it is not enough for the women empowerment. But self-help group doing is lot. So some recommendations we required.
Yes, sir. In fact, budget has to be more gender sensitive. And even though the self-help groups are there, these, in the villages when you go, many of them don't know about various other schemes. But through self-help groups, whatever has been done, the government has played a role. They have benefited as well. But sometimes there are issues which they need help from NGOs because they get the funds, but you need a credit plus approach. So they need training. And sometimes, in a particular area also, all of them manufacture same kind of products. So they need to diversify, they need marketing support. And during COVID, of course, they had markets and they may not have got the payment. But in the long run also, what they require is, they require marketing support. That is one of the major things, and training programs. Correct, and from time to time, counseling also, because yes, because with NABARD and all, when they arrange accounts, it does a lot. So financially, yes, definitely the budget has to be more gender sensitive, and only time, whether it is a central or the state level. But besides finance also, many other things can be done for them besides finance. That is what I
Right.
found. Yes, yes.
Right.
Thank you very much,
Student,
sir, for
please.
your
Yeah. Student, please come forward. If you have any query, if you want to ask anything.
Okay. I think there is no query regarding. So, Madam, it was very nice lecture. You have actually the unpaid work which is done by the women. It has converted through the self-help group as a paid work, and government, from the government side, it should have been given more emphasis and more weightage. As the sir said, more allocation is must for in the budget. So I think madam and all the economists who are working in self-help group and in the special women empowerment will suggest the government, and definitely government will think over that. So I think it's a time to the formal vote of thanks. So I would like to
Sir, there is one question.
One question
Yes,
is there.
yes.
okay.
One question, yes. The most stressful part about, women, it is about, see, the women, in this, they have an altruistic motive. They wanted to do something for the community to help. But in the process, sometimes they forget themselves, their own health, and they first they pay attention to the community, then their own, family well-being. And when it comes to themselves, they have neglected. So, that was a problem which some of the women faced. And that was something which, had to be tackled through tele sessions and so on, tele counseling and so on. Yes.
Okay, nice.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah,
So
welcome.
may I request Professor Rupali Devekar madam to propose the vote of
Thank you, Dr. Gore sir. A very good afternoon to all of you. Today, I am here to propose the vote of thanks of today's resource person, Dr. Marina Pereira Madam, Associate Professor, Head Department of Economics and Coordinator, ME Economics, Nagindas Khandwala College, Malad, Mumbai. I am very much thankful to you from my bottom of heart for accepting our invitation for 1 week lecture series program. Madam, you have focused on lives to livelihood, self-help group, and micro enterprises in COVID times. Madam, really, all the participants have been added the knowledge on this innovative topic. It will definitely help us in future. I am also thankful to all participants for your patience. Once again, thanks to everyone. Over to you, Gore sir.
Thank you, madam. And just a few minutes, I will give me 1 or 2 minutes only. I will share the feedback link, and then you can leave.
Marina madam, thank you so much once again.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And a wonderful audience and wonderful organizers.
Yes,
Thank you very much for the thing, for giving me an opportunity to voice my ideas. Thank you very much, everyone.
It was nice.